Hey everybody, I'm in Tennessee at the Hermitage to learn about the life of Andrew Jackson. The Hermitage, the home of Andrew Jackson, general, president, and one of the most controversial figures in American history. The Hermitage is in many ways a mirror into Andrew Jackson's life. Stately, ambitious, and steeped in history, but also marked by contradictions that force us to see both his triumphs and his flaws. Andrew Jackson had a fiery spirit and a fierce will to succeed. Despite being raised in poverty and being orphaned at an early age, by the early 1800s he had built a career as a lawyer, landowner, and militia leader in the then frontier state of Tennessee. In 1804, Jackson and his wife Rachel moved to the Hermitage, a cotton plantation located in a large meadow east of Nashville. At the time, Jackson owned 9 slaves. As the farm increased in size, that number would only increase. His fame would skyrocket after the War of 1812, especially his victory at the Battle of New Orleans, where Jackson's ragtag army crushed the British. The war made Jackson a national hero and earned him the nickname Old Hickory for his toughness. In 1821, Jackson built a proper mansion at the Hermitage, more fitting for a man of his national stature. At the same time, his enslaved workforce swelled to 80. Jackson's military fame propelled him into politics. In 1824, he ran for president and actually won the popular vote, but with 4 major candidates, there was no majority winner in the Electoral College. So the election was decided by the House of Representatives, and the presidency went to John Quincy Adams in what Jackson called the corrupt bargain. Jackson's political enemies attacked him relentlessly, even going so far as to publicly question the legitimacy of Jackson's marriage to his wife Rachel. Yet 4 years later, he came roaring back and won the presidency in a landslide in 1828. Jackson's victory was celebrated as a win for the common man, small-time farmers who he championed against the elite political class. It was known as Jacksonian democracy, and it was a true turning point in the history of the United States. More Americans were voting, and Jackson's style of politics energized the country. Yet, just when Jackson should have been celebrating his greatest achievement, tragedy struck when his wife Rachel suddenly died right before he was to take office. Jackson blamed his political enemies for her death, and he swore he would exact revenge on them however he could. During Andrew Jackson's time in the White House, he faced 3 major challenges that shaped his legacy. The first was the Indian Removal Act. This 1830 law forced Native American nations from their homelands to lands west of the Mississippi River. Jackson and his supporters argued that the law would help the native people survive by removing them from the threat of white settler encroachment. Its detractors saw it as an illegal land grab. The Cherokee Nation fought back and even won their case in the Supreme Court ruling Worcester v. Georgia in March of 1832. Yet President Jackson ignored the ruling. Eventually, tens of thousands of Native Americans were marched from their lands west on the Trail of Tears, a deadly journey where disease, exposure, and hunger claimed countless lives. It remains one of the darkest chapters in our nation's history. At the same time, Jackson also battled the Second Bank of the United States, who he believed benefited the wealthy merchant class at the expense of the common farmer. When Congress renewed its charter in 1832, Jackson vetoed it, yanked federal funds, and sent them to state-run banks, which crippled the bank for good. Supporters called it a victory for democracy. Critics feared it would destabilize the economy. Both may have been right. Yet Andrew Jackson's most important contribution may have saved the nation itself. In November of 1832, South Carolina tried to nullify federal laws, claiming they could reject any federal law that they didn't like. Jackson's own vice president, John C. Calhoun, was one of nullification's strongest supporters, and the Palmetto State even threatened to leave the Union through secession if it didn't get its way. Yet Andrew Jackson wasn't having it. He famously declared, "The Union, it must and shall be preserved," and even threatened to raise an army and use force if necessary to keep South Carolina in line. Congress eventually passed a compromise tariff and South Carolina backed down, but Jackson's strong stance on preserving the Union would not be forgotten. After his 2 terms in office, Jackson retired back to the Hermitage to live out the rest of his life. The plantation continued to expand in both size and its enslaved population. By the time of Jackson's death in 1845, more than 100 slaves lived and worked on the property. The home slave bells can still be seen today. The Andrew Jackson Foundation operates the Hermitage and has decorated the home with many authentic items from Jackson's life, including the actual bed in which he died on June 8, 1845. Every year, over 250,000 people visit the Hermitage. Here, you could walk the same halls that Andrew Jackson called home and stand at his final resting place. Yet, it is also a space for reflection on leadership, ambition, and the consequences of power. So come learn about Old Hickory at the Hermitage. It's one of the best places in Tennessee.